Are you looking to become a Tier 1 operator in the gaming world? Elevate your games with Blacksite Studio Terrain.
All right, welcome everybody to the SITREP Podcast. We are live today, spread across the world, and what a week it's been. There's been a major hurricane down south, and our good friend Jim has been hanging on by nails, waiting to see if it was going to strike South Florida. Thankfully, it kind of skirted the coast and moved up along the coast. But unfortunately, our friends over in the Bahamas did not fare as well. They're digging out from the wreckage of the post-storm. And I can tell you from being in some hurricanes myself, and Jim can attest to it as well, it is not an easy task. There will be days of just wonderment of how they survived. And our thoughts and prayers and best wishes go out to all the people affected by Hurricane Dorian. So with that out of the way, let's move on. So with me right now is Ralph. And hold on a second. It doesn't look like we're getting your audio. I don't know why. Let me try that again. No, it's just... I don't know why it's not showing. Hold on a second here. Let me try it again. And yeah. Okay. Oh, yeah, I know why. Stand by. Because I'm an idiot, and that's just the way it is. That's what happens when you give a gun bunny computers. Okay. Let's try that. I don't know. Is it better? Not really. Hold on, guys. I don't know what happened here. We lost a... I have 20 different things. There we go. All right, now try it.
Is that better?
That is better. Hey, we got it fixed. And... from somewhere in the East Coast-ish of the United States is the Hurricane Dodger himself, Big Jim Oriskany.
That is me in an undisclosed location. I could tell you, but I'd have to kill you.
All righty. So we do have a special guest that'll be joining us at some point during the conversation. He is doing parental duty at the moment, but will be joining us, and that's Piers from... He's still Iron Fist Publishing, is it not, Jim?
I'm not. Yes, to the best of my knowledge.
Okay. He is coming on to talk about a new expansion to their rule set Battlegroup, and this one is very appropriate for this podcast because it's called Northag or Northag or Northag, depending on where you're from in the world. So that is basically Cold War going on. So I'm very excited, and I think it's going to be scaled to 15 mil. Is that what you're thinking, Jim or Ralph? Have we heard what the scale that... I know you can scale it up or down, but I think 15 is preferred.
The Battlegroup, the system has... the World War II books have always been pretty scale agnostic.
Yeah.
It's written for 20... At least the World War II ones are. But I think for Northag, they're aiming it a little bit small. They're aiming it for 10s, 15s, is what I've read. I haven't seen yet, of course, myself personally, but that's what I've heard.
Yeah, I think it's with it being size agnostic. You can run it in any scale, but I think it's aimed for a slightly smaller scale. I think it's aimed for 15 because Plastic Soldier Company have been putting out... Earlier this year, we're putting out images of 15 mil Russian stuff. So, and I think that's the line that will be used with it if you're going down a route of grabbing, miniatures.
Right. Yeah, that's my understanding. Is that Plastic Soldier Company, who's pretty much taken over the publishing, the rule sets. My understanding is that they are. Creating the miniatures for it, and it's going to be 15 mil, so which means essentially I could use my Team Yankee stuff with this rule set as well. I mean, obviously I I know we've talked about this in the past, and one of the things I like is smaller scale, and I'm thinking 10 or 6 mil. But again, I'd have to see the rules, and I can't wait for Piers to jump on so he can give us a really in-depth look, at the rules and how he feels the gameplay will be and ideal scales. And we kind of beat down the whole realistic ranges, and as Jim has said many a time, modern warfare range is kind of a moot point with modern ballistics and things like that as far as gaming goes. So it'll be interesting to see what he has to say about it. Just to let everybody know, we are live and we are broadcasting across many formats. We are on Facebook right now. We are on Twitch. We're on YouTube. Our Mixer, we had to jump through some new hoops, so I don't think we're on Mixer right now, but it looks like we've got several people joining us on YouTube and Twitch and Facebook. I know, Jim, you don't monitor Facebook, so I'll monitor Facebook if you wouldn't mind monitoring one of the other channels for chats.
I am on YouTube right now.
Okay.
And I'm on Twitch.
All right, perfect.
I've got Twitch open.
So we've got our 3 up right now. I did not jump on our Discord channel because I really need to work on that a little bit more, and I want to get that up and running smoothly. I swear I need to take like a week off just to get familiarized with all the integration of all these social media platforms so we can use it to our best ability.
Yeah,
and as always, I want to thank our sponsor, Blacksite Studios, for supporting us and able to bring these programs to you guys. So please make sure you check out Blacksite Studios. They have a really great pre-colored terrain. They got a lot of exciting things coming down the pipe as well.
Yeah, there was one went out this week, and it's 3D printed. They've just on their Facebook page put out the coming soon 3D printed items.
Okay.
For their buildings, so it's things like furniture and things like that, and they are now doing 15 mil kits.
Sweet.
So if we're looking for stuff if we'll go 15 mil with Northag, Battlegroup Northag, or one of the other many squad-based or platoon-based modern games, have a look at Blacksite Studios. Their kits are really nice.
Sweet. So now we just got to convince them to do it in 10 mil. Right, So,
to get some more Middle Eastern buildings, that's what we're easy to say as well.
So while we're waiting, Ralph, what have you been up to hobby-wise? Anything worth mentioning?
I picked up, and it's not really modern combat related, but I've got picked up some Spectre Minis, some of the agents and stuff, and I'm going to convert them to survivors for either zombie game or using the Spectre rules to do, post-apocalyptic. So I got some of the Spectre Minis to do that, some of the agents, because the agents work really well, and they look like Division agents as well.
Oh, nice.
Off the, the balaclavas and a lot of the civilian backpacks and things like that. And I also got, because between last show and this show, Spectre released 4 new scenario-based minis.
Oh.
Which I don't know if people have seen. So on the website you've got now, they released an advisor, which is the miniature is a guy in basically combat fatigues holding a map. So it could be a technical advisor for an insurgent group or local government or whatever. They released a general, which could double up as a HVT for a certain Eastern European country, because the uniform looks very much like that. Nice. It's the winter coat with the cap. A character called the Salesman, who could be used as an arms dealer.
Okay.
In scenarios. And the last one is Dictator, who's basically an African dictator. What's interesting about the Dictator mini is this is one of the Kickstarter minis that they did originally, that they've re-released.
Wow, nice.
So you've got these 4 new, on the Spectre Miniatures website, they come under the scenario miniatures.
Uh-huh.
Where you've got your close protection, your witch doctor, and your hostages, and all of the bits that they did. So where about 2 or 3 months ago, they released a collection of resin pieces, which were objective markers for Intel, and it's a server rack.
Okay.
With papers and stuff. Arms, basically weapons caches, some WMD crates, so you got like nukes and things like that. Mm-hmm. And they were 3 sets that they did, so it falls under that category. So they're there for objectives, basically, and things like that to flesh out the scenarios with. So I picked up 3 of those as well, 3 of the 4. The only one I didn't get is the Dictator, because it's a nice mini, but not really what I'm interested in. So I picked up the Survivor, the General, and the Salesman.
Gotcha.
So I've got some ideas, especially with the General. I think the General is there's an interesting scenario idea where it could be a rogue officer from a Eastern European country, and that could be the HVT that you're going to try and capture or eliminate.
Gotcha. That sounds cool. That sounds really cool. Anything else there, Ralph?
I got my beta invite, so I've been playing a little bit of Ghost Recon Breakpoint, the new Ghost Recon game that comes out on the 5th of October. So
is that the one that I kind of went drill sergeant on?
No, that was Modern Warfare. This is Ghost Recon.
Okay.
This is the Ghost Recon, the Tom Clancy.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Games.
So
this is the really good, actually. They've done some really nice mechanics with it, where in the traditional sort of third-person action game that this is, especially the original Ghost Recon Wildlands, which is what this is a direct sequel to, when you got shot, there was no consequences. Because the way they've created Breakpoint is it's predominantly single player, so you don't have your teammates with you, even though they're bringing them in. When you get attacked and if you get overrun, you'll get the alert to fall back, and if you get shot, you actually have wounds, and you have wound levels. So if you say are really low on health, you'll be hobbling, there'll be blood, you have to stop and bandage yourself, and it takes into that sort of consideration of you will get overrun. If you set the alarm off, drones come out of nowhere, because the premise is that you're on an island that was owned by a tech company that created drones, and it's been taken over by a PMC that you're then having to try and get off the island because you were sent there originally to investigate, and things have gone wrong, as they often do in these types of games. So you try and either find out whatever and also eventually evacuate the island. So there's drones and and PMCs chasing you and things like that. So
sure.
It's really good. From a gameplay point of view, there's some really nice mechanics, and they've kept some of the things in. So you've got what's called the gunsmith, where you can completely customize any weapon, from putting rails on to putting different optics on to putting different magazines on, suppressors, compensators, grenade launchers, laser sights, the whole gamut of things that you can do to a modern firearm. You can completely customize them for the and of course those customizations are unlocked, so you can get blueprints to build them, or you can get them from drops, because they're going down the loot mechanic a bit, where that most role-playing games do, like an MMO, a bit like Warcraft and stuff, has a loot mechanic. You kill a creature, you get some loot. It's doing that sort of mechanic with caches and some of the enemies that you engage with. So it's really good. It's limited, of course. It's a limited beta, so you get 2 missions plus a bunch of other minor stuff. But you can look around the world and see what it's like, and it's really good to sort of that type of game.
Oh, very cool. So just want to take a moment and just mention some of the people that have joined us on the different sites. So on my site on Facebook, I want to welcome Paul. Thanks for joining us. How about you, Jim? Who do you got over there?
We've got our friend Dennis from Kansas is on us on Facebook.
Welcome, Dennis. And
sorry, I mean YouTube. YouTube, I meant. Sorry.
Yep.
And I think on Twitch, if I look under the users, there's Commander Root.
Nice.
Is on Lurx, LURXX. Novus Templar, who's from Kansas. I think that's Dennis, but I'm not sure.
Yep.
And is it TEYYD? Tried? However the hell you pronounce it. I'm really bad at names. I give up.
Well,
names and me don't.
Names and me don't. Names. Yeah.
Yeah, we want to thank everybody for joining us on this Saturday, no matter where you are in the world. And if at any point you have conversation items, jump in. We are live. We will want you guys in the conversation. So please jump in and, post your comments, and we will talk to you guys on the show. Again, we're still waiting on our special guest. Dad duty is obviously one of those hard things to escape. Oh, wait, I got 2 more messages. Why it hasn't? Okay. Let's see. Okay, let me see if I can jump him in. It looks like he's ready to go. Just give me a second here. Patient with me as I add Piers. Brand. I don't see him popping up. That's all right. He gave me another one. Let me jump back over.
Technology, isn't it wonderful?
It's so much fun. Okay, that's an interesting one. Give me 2 seconds. I need a bigger monitor.
You need multiple monitors.
I have 2, but I need more. I want to get like a 50-inch.
That'd be good for gaming on. Imagine doing Armor on a 50-inch screen.
Oh, I know, right? And don't worry, we are going to get our special operations group up on freaking Arma. My problem is just haven't had time. So
yeah, it takes time.
It does.
Oh, is that Piers?
I'm calling him right now.
Hello. Hello.
Welcome
There he is.
to the show. Yay! I got to get sound effects. Make this much cooler. All right, people. The man, the myth, the legend is on the show. Piers, welcome to the podcast. How are you today?
Hi. Not bad. Busy.
Yeah?
Well, just dogs and children, yeah.
So, you have another expansion for Battlegroup coming out that you wanted to talk about. So, the floor is yours.
We've got Northag.
Yeah.
Which isn't a it's not an expansion of Battlegroup.
Okay.
It's a completely new game.
Oh, is it? Okay.
So it has some similarities to Battlegroup. As in it has it uses a chit system for the morale and things like that, and anybody who's played Battlegroup will sort of will find certain things that remind them of Battlegroup, but it's very much a different game.
So can you tell us a little bit of the differences, just for comparison's sake?
Yeah, so the chit side of it is very similar, where you pull the chits with the numbers and you've got a battle rating. Firing is, the basics are quite similar, as in you only get to fire once in Northag, whereas in Battlegroup you can have an open fire order that fires twice. In this, it's much more sort of once and done with units. There's still a spotting test, and you still got the option of aim fire or suppressing fire. So that's quite similar. The one major difference is how infantry are handled. So in Battlegroup you have individual casualties. In Northag that doesn't happen anymore. You have stands of infantry, which basically represents a fire team. And everything with infantry all evolves around suppressing fire. There's no aimed fire at infantry.
Oh, okay.
And the idea is that infantry are doing what they do best, which is hugging the ground, trying to make themselves as small as possible. So you can kill infantry, but it's all based around suppression. So you try and pin units down when it's infantry. But there remains a chance, if they fail their cover save, you then get a chance to cause casualties on them. But they're treated as fire teams rather than as individuals. So it's sort of stepping up a level from Battlegroup in the size of the forces, and that's why it's sort of aimed more at sort of 10 mil, 15 mil,
Okay.
or even 6 mil, I suppose.
Oh, excellent.
So you can sort of play it anywhere, but I mean you could play it in 20 mil. You just want a very big table, you know. But yeah, so it's all tweaked and different. Things like the artillery system's very similar. That remains pretty much the same from Battlegroup. But it's really is the firing, the orders. There's no tracking ammunition except for units that are armed with anti-tank guided missiles.
Okay.
So it's much faster flying because it's a sort of level above where Battlegroup would sit. The army lists are different. So how you know in Battlegroup you sort of pick your forward headquarters, your infantry, your other bits and pieces, and then those selections allow you to pick other sort of more exotic selections, if you like. With Northag, you actually pick units based on your column of march. So the first units you pick are your forward screen, which are like your reconnaissance elements, forward infantry units that might already be dug in and things like that. Then you pick your vanguard, which is your main strike unit ahead of your main column, and then you pick your main column, which is all your other big units. So it's very, as I say, it's very similar to Battlegroup. People will feel at home in it if they play Battlegroup. I think a lot of people will try and assume rules when they play Northag, and they'll actually be different to what they are in Battlegroup. So then maybe you may find it easier to come to it having not played Battlegroup than if you have, if you know what I mean. You may bring across too many assumptions. Because we find that when we're playing, you know, we have to go, is that in Battlegroup or is that in Northag? But it makes for a very fast, very easy flowing game that retains that narrative sensation that Battlegroup gives. And of course, it's got all the bells and whistles of modern warfare as well. So you've got your anti-tank guided missiles, you've got helicopters now. You've got electronic warfare, you've got engineering, and there's all manner of bits and pieces, you know. And there's nice little tweaks. We've tweaked how objectives work in Northag. So objectives are now worth different amounts of chits depending on where they are on the table. So if you capture an objective that's in your opponent's home deployment zone, say like their sort of last quarter of the table, they have to take 3 chits rather than in Battlegroup it would just be 1. So that forces players to advance and to try and push their forces towards the enemy. So it makes the game very dynamic in that sense.
Excellent. So what time period are we looking at for those who may not be familiar with this?
It's set in 1983.
Okay.
So it's right at that sort of cusp of the sort of second generation of main battle tank. So it's the time when for the British, for example, they have a very limited access to challengers. So I think you can sort of get 3 challenges is about all you're ever going to get in an army, because they are literally just the sort of the first ones on the front line. And the same with the Americans with their list. The Abrams is just coming online. So it's it's at that time period when the balance of power is, in terms of technology and weapon systems, is reasonably balanced. Obviously, always with a slight edge towards the NATO stuff, but it's a nice time period because it lets us have those sort of next generation vehicles like Leopard 2s and like Challenger 1s and M1 Abrams, but without them dominating. And of course, the Soviets have T64s and T80s, things like that. So it's a good mix of stuff. And there's lots of other, obviously, as always with Battlegroup, every model does something. So there's lots of other units. So you've got plenty of APCs and infantry fighting vehicles, but you've got for the British, you've got like the Striker, the anti-tank guided missile systems, like Sultans, the reconnaissance unit. So it's a really nice wide array of forces for each of the belligerents, and it feels right as a time period as well for us.
Would you say you're more on the side of historical accuracy or more for gameplay, kind of a popcorn type game?
Well,
or are you looking for a balance?
No, I mean, it's by Warwick and it's by me, so it always sort of errs towards being historical.
Yeah,
it's that first and foremost. There's nothing there's no vehicles in there that weren't around at that time period. So it's the forces are all historical. They're all based as much as we can on how they would be arranged at that time period. Obviously, there's a few tweaks we make to make gameplay easier. So, for example, our Soviet sections, the motor rifle sections, generally the conscripts wouldn't have acted as two separate fire teams, but we have them as two fire teams because we know the Soviet airborne did, we know the motor rifles did later in Afghanistan. So we've taken the view that the guys that are fighting in the Soviet forces in Germany will be the best of the conscripts. So for gameplay's sake, we have their sections split into two fire teams because it gives us the ability to have a base of fire with small arms and then give one of the fire teams an anti-tank capability with their RPG. So it's historical, but maybe with a little touch towards gameplay as well.
Gotcha.
Well, that's where all the Category 1 divisions were deployed mostly. So, like you were saying, those are going to be the best of the best.
Exactly. And it is the sort of first 3 days of the war because we don't see it going on much past that.
Thank you.
Yes. It'll be a short, sharp fight with the best of everything, and then all over and done with. And we've done a fair bit of reading, and we don't. We kind of find the Soviets are probably actually a bit better at doing stuff than they're given credit for in a lot of books written by NATO people at the time. So we've kind of given the Soviets. I suppose the tendency with people when they do Cold War games is to look at the Soviets and think, right, so they're gonna attack in a big long line of tanks, and it will just be a mass, and it will just roll. It's the red tide. It will just roll over. So we'll make them a horde army, and that wasn't something we particularly wanted to do with the Russians. It didn't. For us, after reading about their doctrine and their forward screens and how they operated, there is. They will throw companies of tanks forward, but there's also. There's a reasonably astute level of command in there. They are quite focused and linear is how they'll perform in a command and control. But there's still the ability is still there, So our Soviets may not be as robotic as some people are expecting, if that makes sense.
I find two things that sort of lead into that. Number one, I'm sure you've read this book, Piers, but if anyone else on the podcast hasn't read this book, Red Army by Ralph Peters.
Yeah.
Okay. That's a book that's really, it's Team Yankee, but from the Soviet side. Yeah. And you really get a good look at how their army really works. And as far as who Ralph Peters was during the NATO period, he was some sort of intelligence officer or something during the 80s. And as far as the other thing, as far as how the Soviets are often perceived in the Cold War context, a lot of that was, pro-NATO propaganda from the 80s. But even after that, nowadays, we're looking back at the 1980s and how things may or may not have gone. It's kind of looked back through the lens of the Gulf War. We saw how terrible the Iraqis did, and people assume the Soviets would have been just as bad, and I don't feel that's the case at all.
No, and also you have to take into account the stuff written by Suvorov, the defector as well, who is a good mine of information, but was also telling people what they wanted to hear. So yeah, I think you're right. I think you have to look at the Russians and think, what would they have done if it really happened? Because and it's funny. Me and Warwick were watching British training videos, and all the British Army training videos are the Russians will advance in this way. They will do this, and then they will do that, and then they will do this. And we go, but what if they don't? And it's like, and the next thing will be the BTRs will appear, and they'll all get out and walk towards you. And you go, but what if they don't? It seems to be such a blinkered vision of the Russians. They are going to do that, and it's like, well, what happens if they don't? And so ours are like that. Ours, you can play them as a mass tank charge if you want to, but we like to think our Russian commanders might be a little bit more canny in what they're going to do. And the Warsaw have advantages and disadvantages. Obviously, they don't have as much command and control in the game as NATO does. And we've reflected that in slightly different ways to how we have done in the past in Battlegroup. I know in Battlegroup you always roll for your orders at the start. A number of D6. We've changed things slightly. That's still there, but you also have an option in Northag of taking a set amount of orders depending on the game scale. So, for example, you can play what we call a company level game at 750 points. And you can choose to either roll 3d6 and add your officers, or you can choose to use a set number of orders. And that's so that we wanted that random element, but we also wanted people, because of the command and control, to have the option to choose a set amount. So say for NATO, they can choose to have 12 orders rather than roll. So it gives somebody the ability to go, right, well, this turn I definitely need to do that, that, and that. So I'm going to take the 12 rather than roll. Obviously, the Soviet Warsaw Pact Force get a lower amount to choose from, but they also have these the ability to do company orders, which is to issue a single order type to an entire company of tanks or infantry, which makes them a lot less flexible, but saves them a lot of orders. So you can, so with the Russians, you can advance en masse, but it becomes very limiting in what else you can do. And then as soon as you try and then want units to do different things, you can't use your big company-wide orders, so you start scrabbling around for orders again. So the Russians are kind of really good to come on in a wide attack, but you have to be very careful that it doesn't break down once you get in amongst the enemy. Well, of course, NATO is the opposite. There are a lot less of them, but they're a lot more surgical. It's a bit like playing Russians versus Germans in Battlegroup, really.
I was going to say, if I can part with a nasty secret, I played a lot of Battlegroup. That's usually how we would play it. We would take the number of officers we had in our force, take the number of dice depending on our command level, whatever size game we were playing, and just multiply that number by 3.5. Like that's your average D6 roll. Like, look, let's just say you get, okay, we're playing a company level game that's 3D6. Okay, you get basically 10 dice or 10 orders plus number of officers. You get 12 orders a game or something like, or 12 orders a turn, something like that.
Yeah. Well, we've done it because it just gives players a different option. They can take the risk because there are we wondered if anybody would ever bother rolling dice. If we gave the option there of say, you get 10 orders or you roll, and we were thinking, well, was anybody going to? And then as we played, we found out we'd quite often flick between the two, just from one turn to the next. As you look at it and go, right, I need to do this, this, and this. Okay, I can do that on 10 orders. I won't bother rolling. And then next turn, you may have found you've got a bit more embroiled. I had 2 tank companies advancing, and of course, these company orders that cost you very few points are great to send troops forward. But once you're amongst the enemy and fighting stupidly, because I'm like that, through a town, tanks,
Oh, here we go.
Yeah. it all bogged down, and I can't use it because the company orders are basically either everybody advance or everybody advances and fires. Once your forces and companies split up into pieces and doing different things, you don't want everybody to do the same thing. So the second turn, I had to roll the dice and roll my 3d6 and add my officers to try and get enough orders to move the different parts of the tank company that I wanted to. And of course, it all went horribly wrong. But
like I said, that's where you get, okay, you take the safe median option, or you go for extra orders and then you roll. Exactly. That's when you roll 3 1s or something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, managed to get 4, I think.
So you were mentioning electronic warfare. Is electronic warfare going to be where? Is that how it's going to affect things, like in the order phase?
Yes. Yeah.
So interdicting enemy communications and things like that.
Exactly. It knackers up your enemy's orders. And now we've been playtesting it quite a bit, and it basically cuts the number of orders in half for your opponent's next turn. Now, currently, it's like a once and done thing. So you get one attempt with it for the game, rather than it being a constant thing. So it's like the enemy has basically just hacked your communications and shut everything down, and it adds something else to think about. It's obviously you've got to have the vehicles got to be on the table to do it and things like that. But it adds a little. It's a little nod towards the period we're playing. We've got things like ground surveillance radar and things like that for tweaking how your artillery are doing. So there's all those little elements feed in, and that's why I kind of like where we've gone with it, because rather than it being just, I think there's a tendency just to go lots of tanks. Everything. As always, the same with Battlegroup. Everything has a role. Everything can do something, and we've tried to reflect all the new technology, but also reflect it in a way where it does something in the game. So you have your little electronic warfare units. We've got your AA batteries. I mean, Christ, never leave. The first thing you put on your list is anti-aircraft. My God, it's such a difference to Battlegroup. It's like the first game we play on. I don't bother with anti-aircraft. Don't need that. Oh my God, jeez. Yeah.
There it is.
It's not good. So the first thing I have now for my Soviets is an air defense battery that literally arrives with the reconnaissance units and just sits on the table on ambush fire, just waiting in case something turns up. And it's good because it's it makes you think, right, what does a commander need? Well, I have to have air defense, because if those helicopter gunships turn up and you don't have air defense, yeah, it's not pleasant. Let's put it that way.
In GDW assault, I've lost literally half a regiment to like one pair of Apaches.
Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't take long. It doesn't take long. Pop and shoot, and before you know it, it's like my kingdom for a Shilka right now. Just one or 2 batteries of Shilkas.
We had a game playtest going the other night, and we had 2 Lynx arrive on the same turn, with tow-armed Lynxes that promptly came on, and of course, I had a Shilka and a Gaskin, and they were both on ambush fire, and of course they both missed. And the Lynxes just chewed up, just started chewing through my T-64 tank company, and it's just like, well, this isn't nice. Fortunately, 2 turns later, I had 2 Hinds arrive. And that really does make NATO sit up and listen when the Hinds arrive, because they don't. It is such an evilly big helicopter,
I still remember that interview you did, Gianna, with me and Bruce Lee at the boot camp, and they're like, "Why did you pick the Soviet site?" I said 6 Hind gunships. Yeah. Why did you 6 Hind gunships? 6 Hind gunships.
Yeah. Exactly. They are a phenomenal piece of kit, and it's great. They turned up and dumped all their ordnance onto some tanks and buggered off again, But I lost one to a Rapier missile battery, which...
that's a darn shame.
Yeah, it was.
So the air assets, are they going to be actually playable miniatures, or is it kind of like an off-table type?
No, the gunships are on table.
Excellent.
So you have all your nice funky gunships. You can buy timed airstrikes, which I suppose you don't need the aircraft for, but we've bought them, because we like having them turn up in case they get shot down, and so you've got that. We've also got you can buy combat air patrols as well.
Nice.
So you can actually have your air defense up in the air protecting you. And there's plenty of off-board options. So a lot of the artillery is off-board, just because of the sheer ranges of stuff by this time. And we've even got off-table SAM batteries. So it's kind of trying to squeeze everything in that's available in some form or another, whether it's on table or off table. It should all be in there. I mean, we have a chip with a mushroom cloud on it.
No way.
No.
That was part of the plan.
Yeah.
That was part of the plan. Some of the article series we wrote earlier for On Tabletop, we found, if you know where to look on the internet and you're patient, that stuff leaked out in the 90s. You found the plans. And that, especially in the part of the Cold War that we're talking about, northern Germany into Belgium and Holland, that's where all the nukes were going. We're to seal off those ports. Bremerhaven, Hamburg, Amsterdam, Antwerp. It was to shut down those northern European ports so that reinforcements from the UK and US, Nova Scotia, and so on, wouldn't be able to make it in.
Yeah, and we've brought that in now. There's certain, as always with Battlegroup, there's certain things you have to achieve or not achieve before you can use them. So, in the army list, there's options in the army list where you can take this thing called cleared for chemical attack.
I was just going to say, how about the other WMD that everyone always forgets about?
Exactly.
The Soviets were so ready for that. 300,000 chemical warfare troops.
Yeah,
we had exactly zero. That's all they were doing is chemical warfare.
Yeah, so you can if you buy that option and then you draw one of the gas chits, you can launch a chemical attack. Then you've also got and obviously there's another option in your army list called critical battlefield, which basically means if you take that and you've got a quarter of your battle rating left, and you've chosen critical battlefield and you draw the nuke chit, you can fire a nuke at the enemy.
This is a breakthrough zone. This is
It's basically, we're going to die, so we're going to take you with us. It is the sort of Battlegroup equivalent of just flicking the table up in the air. But, we figured, why not? And it hasn't happened in one of our play tests yet, but it will do. But there's still dice rolls to be made. Not many. But
in some others, I haven't had a chance to play Northag yet, obviously. So I don't mean to be talking about other games, but I've been in other games like this in this general area. Nuclears. Forget about it. But whenever you get into the chemical stuff, it's okay. What kind of chemical agent has been deployed? Like some sort of blood agent, or God help you, a nerve agent. What that's going to do is it's not going to wipe out the table like a lot of people might think, but it's going to force both sides or one side to adopt some sort of MOP level. And gee, I know have you ever done any stuff in MOP 4 or anything like that?
It sucks. We did a whole FTX in MOP 4.
And that's just a crap load of negative penalties. You have to fight in this stuff, move in this stuff, see in this stuff. Yeah, even the tanks with like the overpressure and the filter NBC system, you still have to mop up. Was that military operational preparedness posture? Is that what it actually stands for? It's basically the big chemical suit for those on the chat, and it's not fun to do anything in, much less try to fight a battle.
Exactly, yeah, and that all comes into it. So it lets us have these things, but it also it leaves it to player discretion. So if you don't take cleared for chemical attack and you don't take critical battlefield, then those chits are superfluous. If you draw them, they just don't count as anything. But the option's there, and it's been a nice thing that you can theme sort of battles. So we've been playing sort of campaigns defending the sort of route to Hamburg, and in the last we did one which was a British rear guard and my opponent took that critical battlefield because he decided this was it. This was the last stand, outside Hamburg. So he was taking critical battle. No, he didn't draw the nuke chip, but it was there in the back of his mind as he was watching his battle rate and tick down. He was like, right, once I get to under 10 BR left, I can, and I get that nuke chip, I'm nuking those Russians. But he never got it, so I rolled over him. But it just adds that flavour of that period, I think, is what's key, Yeah. It's just a nod to all the different components. And that's why when we first started doing Northag way back a couple of years ago, it was very much we just took Battlegroup and changed the tanks. And it was after we were playing it, we were going, yeah, it's just Battlegroup with different models, and then we were like, well, that's not Cold War, that's just Battlegroup with different models. It just didn't feel right, and this was why we threw the whole thing away, and I just said, right, I don't want to do it like that. You have a go at it, Warwick, and Warwick went away and came back with this idea of stepping up a level, and it feels a lot more like Battlegroup. And I think stepping down a scale to 10 mil, and whether you go 6 mil or 15 mil, it gave us a better sense of Cold War, because we tried in 20 mil and it just wasn't doing what we wanted in 20 mil. And then as soon as we sort of stepped down,
you came to the right church for that sermon.
yeah, exactly.
Smaller scales.
Yeah, well, I used to play Micro Armor years and years ago.
Yeah, there it is.
Yeah. It's always been something we thought about doing, and it wasn't until we tried it, and it just didn't work for us. Sometimes you play a game and it works first time, and it didn't work with us. How we, taking Battlegroup and making it Cold War just wasn't what we wanted. We wanted it to be something else.
It's a pitfall that a lot of games fall into, and it's not just Cold War. It's like most 20th century war games start off somewhere in World War II. I mean, it just does. And then, like we were talking earlier on tabletop, it'd be like, all right, we're going to talk about the centennial for World War I. Well, what World War I games have you played? I'm like, well, I have yet to see a World War I game, because all I really see are World War II games with a World War I skin slapped on top of it.
Exactly.
And it doesn't really work, because there's a bunch of limitations that now apply, and people are going to be upset that they can't do the things that they could do in World War II. I'm sorry, there are no radios, and so on and so forth. And then even in some of our Panzerleader games, that's all in 1942, 44, 45. And, let's do Cold War. Let's just replace all the Panthers with Abrams and see what happens. Well, it's possible, but you pretty much have to start from scratch. Yeah,
you do, yeah. And I think that I suppose for us it was we did exactly what we don't do with Battlegroup. With Battlegroup, every campaign is a different book, because to us, World War II is loads of different things. It's not one war. So for us, it was an odd thing for us to do, looking back on it, that we should take rules we wrote for World War II and apply them to Cold War, when we don't even do that in World War II. Do you know what I mean? We have these different books. So yeah, I think it was good though. It made us take stock and made for myself, it made us realise what we needed. And then it was good, because I just sort of went, I'd originally done work on it, and I gave it to Warwick and said, you need to look at this and you need to think about this. And then he came back and went, I've rewritten it all.
This is the conversation we've had recently about bolt action into Korea, into Vietnam, and it's like, it's not just a step up. You have to start over from scratch. It is a fundamental down in the wool difference.
Yeah,
you have to start
definitely.
pretty much.
Ralph,
did you have a question before?
It's sort of a question as well, and the fact is, because I'm looking here, I've got the PSC Facebook page posted up, and I noticed on the 1st of September, PS that day, shall we say, showed off the starter army for the Russians.
Oh yeah.
For Northag in 10 mil, and
wait a minute, 10 mil? I thought it was 15.
No, this is a 10. It's 10 mil.
It's always been 10. It's always been 10.
And it's a nice. There's lots of other games out there that do. Well, there's one other game that has done this, but I think from what you're saying and what you've been saying, especially this stuff with the chemical warfare, nuclear elements, I've never seen that put in any of this type of game.
Yeah,
that's out there at all. But the starter army seems really, really nice. Do you know what else is being planned from a starter army point of view? Because this one, for what they've got, and I'll run through quickly, is you're getting 10 tanks, you get 9 BTR 60s, 2 BR DMs, and 82 infantry figures.
Yeah,
so that's a nice starter set.
You're effectively, you're getting a tank company, an infantry company, and a couple of recce units. Yeah, it's a nice start. You're going to be wanting to buy more though.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I was going to say that's a pretty almost 1-to-1 representation of like what they used to call what was the actual term for it? Like a Soviet forward maneuver group or something like that. Like, yeah.
That's effectively what players will be controlling. Will be that forward maneuver group and then the column following it up.
Okay.
Do
you know what else is being planned from the starter army point of view that you can sort of let hint, shall we say?
Yeah, well, there's quite a bit. I mean, the idea when we sort of spoke with PSE, because PSE have bought Battlegroup from Warwick, which is another slight tangent, but basically they now own it. So it was always, the idea was always, even before then, was that the PSE would do, rather than doing just kits of things, it would be, right, we're going to do boxes, and what I said was pocket money prices, where you get a whole unit in a box. And then that expanded to these little sort of army boxes. So, for instance, one of the other boxes is you can just buy a tank company. So you can buy 10 T-64s in a box. Or you can buy, I think it's 9 chieftains, something like that.
The other one they showed off, is the BTR 60 company, which is 10 BTR 60s.
Yeah. And there's a BMP one. There's a British recce one, I think, that has scorpions and scimitars. There's an FV432 one. There's a British Army box, which is 6 chieftains and let me think. 8 APCs and some infantry. So it's all there. That'll be all in little boxes. And I'm probably not supposed to say anything, but I know PSC have got a new system for doing plastics, which I think they showed off some of the models on Facebook recently.
They've been showing some of the new plastics, I think, that have been coming out, especially with their World War II range.
So they
just
tell you what, if you're going to play Northag or not, folks, that starter kit. BTR 60s, that's one of the vehicles. I mean, for people who know about this stuff, BTR 60s, that's one of those vehicles you can use almost freaking anywhere. Those things have been used on, except for maybe Antarctica, I mean, on every continent. I mean, they're literally everywhere. And T-64s, never mind being one of the most underrated tanks in recent decades, because a lot of historians or whatever skip over. They think it's T-55 to T-72 to the T-90. It's like, no, there's this other branch of Soviet tank development, so T-64 to the T-80. And even if you don't play Northag, which I'm not suggesting that you don't, but you can still use those models in. I mean, T-64s are in action right now in Ukraine, because when the Soviet Union fell apart, that's where all the factories were. All the T-64 and T-80 factories are in Kharkov. They're all in the areas that fell into Ukraine afterwards. Those tanks are still in service, especially the upgraded ones with the reactive armor panels.
Yeah, I've got an Empress T-80 sitting in a box yet to build for me for me insurgents, and I've got a primed ready to airbrush a T-40 because I just like the look of the tank and I thought that'll go with the Spetsnaz.
Yeah. So I mean, PSC have gone quite big into what they want to produce, and I think this new plastic technology that they're toying with, that they're hoping should allow them to do pretty much everything in plastic, rather than main vehicles and then other things in resin and metal. I think they are hopefully aiming to do just about everything in plastic, which of course is reduces the cost level involved. So.
And cleanup too. I mean, resin. The amount of cleaning you have to do before you start painting is never fun.
Yeah.
Like the least fun part of the hobby, I think.
Exactly. And the nice thing about 10mm especially is it's so fast to paint as well. So it ticks all boxes. Exactly. Yeah. I think PSC are wanting to do like a Soviet green spray. I think so. I said just cast them in green plastic and be done with it.
There you go.
Yeah, green plastic with a little bit of wash there. You are done now.
Wash, dry brush, done.
But yeah, I mean, as far as PSC's plans are, I think they want to try and bring out everything for each of the armies that comes out. Now, in the initial book in Northag, it is just the rules, the British and the Russians, the group Soviet forces Germany. It's just those two lists. Yeah. But that initial book should be followed by Centag, which is just going to be a book of lists, really.
7th Corps and 5th Corps. That's down south.
Yeah. Well,
down in your neck of the woods.
Yeah. It was originally all going to be one big book, but we get crippled on shipping costs basically for big hardback books, and we like doing them for Battlegroup, but we thought this time, we'd split it down to two smaller softbacks and see if it costs us anything cheaper to ship.
I've got a couple of the softback books for Battlegroup. I think I got Ardon and like one other ones, but even the softback books are absolutely gorgeous. Yeah. We talked a lot about the kits. The Battlegroup books, guys, are. I'm not usually a guy to like absolutely, flip out over a book. Those books are freaking gorgeous. They weigh a ton. I can imagine with the shipping. I think I had to put like reinforcements under my bookshelf so it wouldn't collapse. Especially when you got like 6 or 7 of them. But gorgeous.
Well, we've always said if you have a disagreement with your opponent, just hit him with a copy of Overlord.
There you go.
Job's done. But yeah, I mean it's something we've been mindful of about the last year or two when postage costs have shot up, and obviously it sort of kicks back into retail as well. People don't want to stock the books if it costs them a lot to get them there, and so we thought with Northag we'd try softback from the start. I know PSC they're running the Battlegroup reprints is starting next week, and I know a lot of those are going, like Kursk is coming back, and that's going to be a softback as well.
Back to the roots.
Yeah. Well, there's so much out of print at the moment because it's literally we've just pretty much sold everything. So I think I think it's now
a good problem to have.
It is and it isn't. It is and it isn't. I think we're on our 7th print run of the rule book now.
Wow.
That's one of the few. That's one of the few Battlegroup books I don't have in hard copy. Is the original one, Kursk.
Yeah.
I have a PDF somewhere.
Well, I'll send you the softback copy because it's funny. We've almost forgotten what it's like to play it. So both me and Warwick are doing up some stuff for Germans and Russians for Kursk. I'm going to play some Kursk games, because you're so busy doing the next book. You very rarely step back and go and play something, because we've just finished Pacific for completely.
That's what I was going to say. As I noticed, you're bringing the Pacific Theatre out as well as part of the Battlegroup.
Yeah. Hopefully PSC are going to put that into print for end of October, November. I think. I think they've got an M4A2 kit coming out in 20mm. So I suspect that will sort of feed into each other. But yeah, Pacific. I mean, it's a complete. It's a complete punt, really, because it's not a period that would be particularly popular for people to play in the UK, or Europe, really. And I don't even know. I mean, you guys might have a better idea if it's much more popular in the States. But
Historicon had like 4 or 5 Pacific tables in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. One big one for Saipan. That was probably one of the biggest tables there.
Yeah, well, we've always wondered whether it's that chicken and egg thing. Does nobody play it because there's no book out there to play it, or does nobody play it because they don't want to play it? And I kind of think I'm kind of hoping it's because people don't pay much attention to it because it's not there and in your face. So
one big thing that I have noticed with other games, this goes for Flames of War, Panzer Leader, a bunch of other games. Again, it's the same thing we were talking about before. The Pacific is such a different theater. Maybe not even Asia, because there's Asia and there's the Pacific. So leaving aside China, CBI, all that stuff like that. Okay, we're in the Pacific now. Not even really Guadalcanal. Central Pacific Campaign, Tarawa, the Marianas, so on and so forth. So basically Marine Corps. Is these games are written for, the Eastern Front, the Western Front, maybe the desert or whatever. They're written for the more popular theaters of World War II. And then they say, oh, that was a success. What are we going to expand into next? Let's go to the Pacific. And they just basically come out with some Japanese units, here's some Marine Corps, and they slap the same rule set out there. And the game does work functionally, but it's just not fun. Because it's all the Marines get out of the boat, all the Japanese get their opportunity fire phase, a bunch of Marines die, and then those Marines that are left flamethrower their way across the island, and that's the game. And it worked, but it wasn't fun. And you have to do it with its own book, with its own rules, and with its own,
Yeah, I mean, just briefly about Pacific. I mean, it's been one of the longer development phases of a game of one of the books, because most of the other books tend to have some Germans in it, so there's your baseline for starters anyway. So it's always been more sort of tweaking, and we've got quite quick at getting these books into a sort of a state we can play test quite quickly. But yeah, Pacific is it's just been a head wrecker because there's no baseline. Do you know what I mean? There's nothing.
It's a completely different geometry. It's a completely different war.
And the firepower involved, because the supplement is only for sort of 44, 45, and it covers the Pacific US Marines. We've also got a bit in there Burma as well, so it covers the British and Burma. But yeah, I mean it's completely different to the gameplay in other books. There's jungle rules and the way the Japanese work. We kind of didn't want to. Well, it's Battlegroup, so we didn't want to sort of fall into stereotypes.
Right.
So our Japanese. Well, we hope our Japanese act like Japanese. They're very tough. They won't surrender very often. They will occasionally launch banzai charges and things like that. But you need to. There's certain restrictions and things you have to meet, as always with Battlegroup, before you can do. So it's Well,
historically, those were largely outlawed by like 1940, like early 43. They gave up on those pretty quickly.
They did, but it didn't stop them doing them. I mean, they were on I think it was Okinawa. They were told not to do any banzai charges, and they still went ahead and did it anyway. So it's an option that's there, but it's Battlegroup, so it's a nuclear option. Don't expect to launch one in the game not to be over in some respect, whether it's a lot of dead Japanese or a lot of dead Americans. But the games are very different, And
a late war Marine platoon is just absurdly.
Oh my god! Yeah, the firepower that comes off that thing is horrific. Yeah,
the late war Marines, they went through, obviously. Guadalcanal, Bougainville, and then up again. That's all in the South Pacific. Then they start that Central Pacific drive, Tarawa, the Gilberts, then to the Marshalls, Marianas, and every time I was like, we didn't have enough firepower last time. We didn't have enough firepower. By the time we get to Okinawa at the end, or Iwo Jima and then Okinawa, it's like, it's reflected in the numbers. It's people. And again, in some other games, because I haven't had a chance to play Battlegroup Pacific yet, obviously, it hasn't come out. But it's like, are the numbers on these counters typos? There's no way that can be right. We're like, no, that's right. Here's the math. Here's how they got to these numbers. Yeah. And it's insane.
Yeah, they're a scary opposition. But then, our Japanese are scary in their own way. But it's
that's when you get into the hypothetical invasions. If there had been no bomb, and if we had to invade Japan in 46.
Yeah.
That's when you get into some real battles.
That, to be honest. But the Japanese have their little things they can do. So there's it's going to be the first time there's going to be proper sort of, in a way, hidden units and pop-up units and things like that in Battlegroup. So it's and it's nice because we've again, Warwick's thrown the sort of rules out, and we've started again and looked at it from a completely different way. And it's funny how doing that, we've looked at some of these things and gone, actually, that idea for the Japanese spider holes, that'll work really well for fighting in Warsaw in 44, as, you know, troops popping up out of sewers and little bunkers and opening up. You know, so it's as always about Greek, you make this very specific rule for one particular part of the war and then go, actually, you know, that could work for that in Warsaw, you know. So, but yeah, there you go.
Awesome.
And where Northag goes after Cold War, who knows? But it's,
you've got a shall we say, you've got a wide berth of things that have gone on, haven't you? So.
Yeah. I mean, it's down to PSC really. I mean, myself and Warwick are contracted with PSC to finish off the Battlegroup series, which I think is about another. I think it's about another 5 books after Pacific. I think 4 or 5 books anyway. But we have nothing from them. It's basically Northag and Centag is all they've commissioned. Where they go with it after that, I don't know. They have mentioned doing Arab-Israeli conflict, or perhaps something like Iran-Iraq. But it would be interesting to see what they decide. You know, we're doing Vietnam on our own, me and Warwick. So that'll be something to keep an eye out for.
Yeah, that was going to be one of the questions. Was did you choose to do, shall we say, the Cold War, or was there a discussion between you and Warwick to say, where do we go next, or was it just let's do Northag?
It started with me wanting to do Cold War because some of my friends play it, and I used to play it, and then PSC sort of got interested in the fact that Team Yankee came out, that, you know, they wanted to do the models for it. So it was kind of a bit of both really, and then it ended up with PSC actually commissioning Warwick to write it, with me sort of just standing on the sidelines going, but yeah, so it ended up being, I wouldn't say it didn't start as being a project of passion like Battlegroup books are, but it's kind of become one. We both sort of were a bit, I suppose we could do Cold War. And now we both go, it's really good fun, you know. But it was very similar when we did the desert books. I said, I have no interest in playing desert. You go and write, and I'm not bothered, you know. I'll do something else. You go and write the desert because I'm not playing it, of course. Then he gave me the copy of the army list, and I went, I really want to make a model of that. I really want to make a model of that. And then I played it, and now it's my favourite book. So Tunisia.
I actually like the desert. The one that I'm getting, I mean, not tired of or whatever, is the whole Northwest Europe 44 to 45, because it's like everybody does it.
Yeah.
Everybody's seen Saving Private Ryan. Everyone's seen the Brothers. Enough.
But then, you know, I think again with that, I think you just have to look for the outliers. I mean, one thing I'm writing that was in War Games Soldier and Strategy magazine, their September issues. I did a set of 4 articles for them on the Netherlands at the end of 44, sort of what happened after Arnhem. And it's sort of the tank battle around Overloon and all that sort of fighting. So there is stuff out there for 44 on the Western Front. You've just got to, I think people just sometimes need to forget Normandy.
Yeah.
You know, and go and look at something else. And
I like the Era Court and the whole battles around Nancy, like September, down the south a little bit. That's one book that we've got sort of pegged to do is a book that Warwick wants to call West Wall, which would be that sort of after the breakout of Normandy, the sort of Loire Valley and Hürtgen Forest, and sort of breaking into Germany. So I'm kind of keen on that as well, you know. That's one of the areas where it's probably one of the last areas where the Germans and the Allies are, at least tactically, not operationally or strategically, but at least tactically on some sort of parity. I mean, or even possibly at least close.
A bit better, you know. I mean, I think might be where the Americans certainly start sort of outclassing the Germans a little bit, you know, to a degree. So it's be nice, be a different book to do. But I'm I'm sort of just waiting to be told I'm allowed to do Italy. That's what I'm sort of waiting for.
Oh, Italy would be cool.
That's a good tough one.
I can't wait for Italy because it's so forgotten. It's a bit like Burma and Pacific. It's a bit forgotten about, and we were going to do it for release next year, and then PSC decided Stalingrad for next year. So we were like, okay, we'll have to do Stalingrad then, which isn't that bad really, but But again, our Stalingrad isn't just fighting in buildings. It's going to be the whole of 42 of Case Blue and the other stuff going on around the time. So
the two wings, Fourth Panzer Army in the south, and up in the north.
Exactly. So it'll be an all-encompassing, same as we do all the time. It's and I think that's what's kind of nice having done Northag, is it's given us something very different to play and develop. And of course, we've looked at how this system has played in 10mm, and you have to admit we've both looked at it and gone, we could sort of port some of this back to World War II, and maybe there's a grand tactical World War II game in there as well, but that would involve so much arm twisting of Warwick because he's done World War II, doesn't want to do it again, so. I think there'll be a lot of people when they play Northag will think this sort of concept, this sort of level could work really well for big sort of strategic World War II battles in 6mm, But
awesome.
Somebody would have to offer him a lot of money to get him to write another set of World War II rules. But you never know. But as I say, we've also got, as well as the stuff with PSC, with Northag and Battlegroup, we're going off and we're going to do our own stuff as well. So, and the first thing of that is looks like it's going to be a set of Vietnam rules. So
that'll be awesome. So as far as Northag, when are we looking for to release?
That's a very good question. It's where we are at the moment. It's pretty much written. So the rules, we're still tweaking bits here and there. Like as always, the more you play it, the more things you find wrong, and you change, and then you change back, and then you change again, and then you throw it away completely. It's been that sort of process. But we've done that with all our books. We'll always play test them for months because. Our philosophy about Wargames rules is you tend to try and write them once because we don't want to go back and do it again, and that's why we play test so much. So we're on, I suppose what you could say, we're on the sort of final draft of the rules before Warwick does up the print draft. So the sort of final, all nicely written out, laid out example to stick the photographs in. So we're pretty much there. With the Northag book, Warwick has started work on Centag, so he started on the American list. So I'd certainly say by Christmas you'll probably see battle reports with us testing the Americans and the West Germans. But for the game, I think PSC are talking about looking at. I don't know whether they were looking at doing a Kickstarter for vehicles and rules sometime towards autumn this year. Whether that's still going on now they've got this new technology, I don't know, but I suspect we'll sort of hear next month. I suspect maybe end of September, early October they'll start looking at some sort of way of getting this stuff into production. I think the sort of final big retail release will most likely be at Salute next year.
Okay.
Because I think I think that's when they tend to that sort of Salute tends to act as that sort of final point when if you're going to release something big, it goes at Salute. But I'm kind of hoping they're going to get stuff to sort of the guys that are on board at the early times and sort of early orders out a bit earlier, because it'd be nice for those who sort of followed it to be playing it a bit earlier. And as far as the sort of game itself, it's as I say, it's pretty much done. We're going to send the print draft when it's done out to a couple of blind playtest groups, and basically give them the entire book and not tell them anything else about it. We've picked a few guys who are Battlegroup players. Well, when I say picked, we just haven't got around to telling them that they're going to do it yet.
Nice.
Yeah, and we're just going to give them the book and go, right, we're not going to tell you anything about it. You have to take that away and play a game and see what happens.
Okay,
because,
that's good.
well, I think it's the only way we're going to find out because what the only thing that concerns us slightly, and it concerns us because we've done it ourselves and we write it, is we assume things from Battlegroup, even now. And so you really have to lock into your mindset from the start that this is a different game. There's elements that will be familiar and make you feel at home, but it's very much a different game. So we figured if we have some blind play testers who play Battlegroup, and we give them this game and say to them, go and see what happens. We're hoping it's not so much, we're not looking for so much for the feedback on the mechanics and things like that, but more how we've explained things, you know. If they can go away and play a game and don't have too many massive issues, great. There'll probably be loads of issues now, but that's where we are. So it's as I say, so it's pretty much done. Certainly, Northag is there. You know, we could give it to Jim to play a game, and he'd probably get through it. You know, there's a few things still. I mean, even between ourselves, I think we've got 4 different versions of some of the things.
That's a scary moment, though. I mean, you've got the game, you play test it in your group 100 times. People say, hey, what are you doing? We got this great game. Come try it out. I'll play it with you, fine, and you're eager to show it to people. They're like, great, where can I buy this? When are you going to write it down? And it's like, oh. Yeah. Because when you go to write it down, there's this feeling that, okay, now it's written down, it's not as easy to change.
No, exactly.
Is everything really as good as we think it is? And that's a moment right there.
Yeah, and Northag has been an absolute bitch compared to what it's like to Battlegroup books. And of course, it's, you know, we've been doing Battlegroup books for 7 or 8 years, so it's a lot easier. You know, you have that sort of symbiotic relationship where Warwick will go away and write everything and then throw it at me, and I'll look at it and go, that's all right, that's a bit crap. And, you know, even without playing, we sort of get to a point where once we start play testing, we know we've got the foundations at least, if not the conservatory and an attic conversion. But
like you were saying, you always have the Germans, so you always start halfway done.
Exactly, yeah. Whereas with Northag, I mean, we've literally rewritten how the firing works about 4 times, because of course, when we first started, it was very similar to Battlegroup, you know. Everything was firing twice and open fire, blah, blah, blah. And the poor Russians that weren't getting halfway across the table before the chieftains were just destroying everything. We were like, that's not much fun, you know. It might be quite realistic, but it wasn't much fun. So we changed things, and it's been a hard slog, you know. And there's been a good few games, and you know, I'll freely admit some of the early games I played with my playtest group were not enjoyable games. But you could, even then, you could see there was something in there that, you know, there was something really good trying to get out.
Yeah.
And it did. It thankfully, it didn't take very long for us to. And part of it was moving everything, getting rid of ammo counts, and moving everything onto this single firing, and giving there's bonuses for, like, some of the NATO tanks. They get little bonuses to shooting and spotting for their optics and things like that add the tweaks to the system that it needs without taking it too much, without overpowering everything too much.
This is all. I mean, I think it's an interesting choice. I think you guys made the right choice with the date of 1983. Because the difference between 83 and like 89, or God help you, like 91, Gulf War, is a lot changes there. A lot happens. And that delta between that delta between the Soviets and the Americans, as bad as it was in '83, by '91, it's completely out of control.
Yeah, exactly. I think that was all. We had another date which was sort of the mid to late '70s, and to be honest, you can push Northag a bit either way, a year or two without too much effort. But '83 ended up being quite a nice, because we're able to have those second gen tanks, but not in any numbers that really makes a difference. In fact, all of the 4 guys who play British, none of them have even fielded the challenges yet. Mainly because they don't need to, because the chieftains are bloody scary as it is. But I suspect I've got a feeling in my next game I'm facing the challengers, because the chieftains took a bit of a pasting in the last game. I've got a feeling my playtester is busy painting up challengers for tomorrow's game.
Oh.
Yeah, not looking forward to them. Don't know why, but they're a different beast altogether. The chieftains are bad enough, cry.
The Challenger one was a bit of a monster.
It is, yeah, and it's. I mean, as I say, the chieftains are a monster in this, and that they'll pop my T64s at 50 inches.
It's a very similar basic gun, right? It's a 120 rifle still.
Yeah. The gun's not much different. It just
but a lot more electronics, and of course the armor is like a lot better on the Challenger.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, is it's bad enough trying to kill a chieftain. Trying to kill one of those challengers with a T64 is just I have to watch it bounce off a chieftain most of the time, so I'm going to be watching it bounce off a chieftain even more. But look, that's what my timed grad missile strikes are for.
There you go. One last question. This is one of those things that some games tend to walk around, or they're afraid to tackle, or whatever. Firing anti-tank guided weapons out of the gun barrels of main battle tanks for the Soviets. Yeah. Are we doing that, or?
Yeah, we're doing that. Yeah.
Like the AT-9 or whatever that was.
Yeah.
The C-64, T-72, and then the T-80, of course, later would fire.
Yep. We're stupid enough to
there you go.
Yeah. It's an option. It's an option. To be honest, most of the time I've found, I don't know how it's probably quite realistic, but I found the gun tanks tend to be more use.
Right.
The guided missile stuff is basically it has a slightly different firing mechanism to how aimed fire with AP and HE works in the game. The anti-tank guided missiles tend to have a sweet point, sort of mid-range, where it's really easy. It's a lot easier to hit. So they're not great up close, and they're not great at long range, but they're kind of good at middle distance. The problem with intervening terrain is it becomes a nightmare. And obviously, you can't fire a move with these things.
No.
And the last thing I want is my T-64s or T-80s to be stationary when there's chieftains on the other side of the thing.
It's a thing where like a lot of games tend to like either just ignore it or forget about it, because it's literally not much use.
No, it's not. No,
because number one, you have to fire stationary. Number two, American tank platoons at least got the idea, this is during some of the Reforger exercises, to set up behind, never mind, berms and, towns and so on, but chain link fences. Because chain link fences would catch the trailing fiber optic wires on some of these earlier Soviet ATGWs. But then the warhead in an ATGW is obviously a shaped charge warhead, which is specifically the kind of warhead that Chobham and laminate armor is designed to defeat. So the penetrator rod out of 125 millimeter, whatever the hell, anti-tank gun is going to be better anyway than your more advanced missile that you have to be stationary to move. It's literally the Russians don't use it. So why is it in the game? Sometimes games don't use it, provided as an option. But I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if players never use it or very rarely use it. Yeah,
exactly. And because it's so powerful, it does, up the points if you want to take it as an option, So it costs you as well in game. So, I mean, it's there. As always with Battlegroup, we've tried to put everything in that's an option. And always, I think sometimes games can be a little bit too prescriptive in what they want players to do. we tend to leave it up to players, So if they don't want to fire ATGMs out their gun barrels, they don't have to, But the option's there if they do, and they do hit hard. It's just I haven't had the opportunity to fire one yet because I don't want to stop moving, because those chieftains tend to do a lot of damage when I'm stationary.
Well, as a Soviet player, are you usually on the offensive?
I'm usually on the offensive because I have to be, because I want to keep moving if nothing else. the only thing that keeps my T-64s alive is driving towards the enemy. It makes hitting anything a pain, but it keeps me alive till I can get in close. There's a couple of, we've got a few scenarios. The one scenario we've been showing off is one called Escalation, which is the sort of basic scenario where it's two forces bumping into each other, very much like meeting engagement in Battlegroup. So it's that sort of locking horns kind of thing. But what we've done for the Russians is we've given them this option. It's a Warsaw Pact. It's called Advance and Hold. So the Russians by turn 6 have to control at least 2 of the objectives on the table, or they take chits. So they basically get to push out. So the idea is you pay your points, you take that, and you have to push across the table. And it's trying to reflect that sort of doctrinal nature of the Russians, just to keep
Comrade Captain, Regiment's on the phone. They really want to talk to you right now.
Actually, yeah. Why aren't you in that village? Oh, I'm on my way. Yeah. But always, the armies can be quite big as well. There was a lot of, oh my God, when I put up a picture of the army I was using and it had 30 tanks in it, and people were like, oh my God, that's ridiculous. It's going to be like a car park. And
not a 10 mil, but
no, 10 mil. I wouldn't have thought.
Firstly, it's 10 mil on my table, which is 7x5. So you'd be surprised how quickly they disappear. But not everything arrives on the table at once in Battlegroup, So, and in Northag, it's the same. Stuff comes on gradually. By the time my third tank company even had a chance coming on, the first one was just burning wrecks anyway. So,
But 30 tanks is a Soviet tank battalion. This is the thing that kind of burns my ass about other games that will remain nameless, is here's your tank battalion of 7 tanks. I'm like, this battalion's had a rough couple of days, hasn't it? Because they're down to 7 runners. Three platoons of 3, a company commander times 3 companies is 30 tanks. Maybe a 31st one for some sort of battalion commander, but
which in Northag you can take your Battlegroup commander in a tank, so you can do the 31 tanks. But there's one last thing we've done with the army list is we have what we call a reinforcement phase, and that's it. We've made it optional, so players don't have to use it, but you buy reinforcement requests, and those people who've played Battlegroup will remember the artillery requests where you roll.
One of my favorite parts of the game.
Exactly. Well, this is a bit similar. And you roll, but you get reinforcements. So you choose, right, I want a tank company. So you roll to see if you get through, and a tank company might arrive. So
for people in the chat who might not be familiar. So way that of course Piers can explain it better. But the way it works, you can buy artillery off board or on board like in a normal game, or you can buy like a priority request, and for like 10 points your third priority, for 20 points your second priority, or for 50 points your first priority, whatever. I can't remember the actual numbers.
Yeah.
And it's okay, how high are you? Think about and I'm sure Northag does the same thing. Think about Battlegroup. I always liked was it made you feel like your little 4x6, little 15 millimeter, 20 millimeter battle space was part of a larger dynamic that was happening. And you would be like, okay, how important is your battlefield? If you want to be the top commander or whatever, okay, fine. You pick up the radio. You are probably, your rolls to get in that artillery are easier. It's more expensive. Or you can play, you can be cheap and, say, oh, I'm third priority. Well, when you call for artillery, guess what? Nobody's there because they're busy shelling some other part of the battlefield that's more important than yours.
And that's exactly what the reinforcement section does. It's whether or not, is your part of the front where they need to plug reinforcements into. Because it's the same. Although it's a level up, you're sort of you're more like the company battalion commander now, rather than maybe the company commander. You're still part of that bigger battle. You know,
that battalion is still part of a regiment, part of a division, part of a corps. Yeah.
So that narrative is still there. We were very keen to keep that narrative, but just step it up. And it felt like the sort of right sort of step up. I think we always felt that the guy who was commanding that little battle group in World War II, maybe he's just been promoted and now he's commanding this 40 years later. You know, it's like you feel like you've just stepped up and you've been promoted. You know, but what's nice is that although it's similar, there's the sort of the tactical challenges of the game are very different to Battlegroup, which isn't something we particularly expected would happen. But I think it's a very nice byproduct of the difference of differing forces, and the technology has also fed into different tactical options, which is, you know, I mean, you can't do a vertical envelopment in Battlegroup, but you can in Northag. And dropping helicoptering in infantry onto someone's objective in their home deployment zone on like turn 10, when, you know, you're both sort of balanced on chits and suddenly these helicopters come in and dump a load of infantry. It's just it gives you a nice warm fuzzy feeling inside. You know?
Well, it gives one side a warm fuzzy feeling.
Well, it does, yeah, it does, unless they shoot it down and you just watch your entire infantry platoon go down in flames. You're like, okay.
That air mobile infantry probably isn't cheap either.
No, well, it's no, but you know, it's worth the risk. You know, it's worth the risk. Because it can make a real difference. You know, you can literally win a game that you're losing on dumping your infantry on, as I say, because the objectives are scaled depending on where they are. It can be a game winner. It can also be a game loser if someone shoots it down. You know, so it's a tactical option, but it's one you have to be really careful about using. But of course it's there, and because it's there, I want to use it.
Yep.
Yeah, but you know, I don't mind the risks. You know, there's plenty more plastic Russians. You know,
especially if it's the last turn of the game, like you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I suppose it's something from the period that you want to reflect. You know, then again, like the gas and chemical attacks and nukes and anti-tank guided missiles and the electronic warfare and all those things. It's trying to get all those things in where they all do something different, but without the whole thing becoming this sort of jumbled mass of too much. You know, I think we struck a nice balance where players will get, again, like Battlegroup, they'll get the feel of the period, and feel like they're playing with that sort of historical period, but also be able to play a really good, fast, fun game as well. Which that's kind of the holy grail for us, is to have the historical side of it as much as we can, but also to have a game that's really playable. You know.
Well, guys, I think that's going to wrap us up for this episode. I want to thank our special guest, Piers. We're really looking forward to this rule set, and I don't know about you guys, but I think a War Game Weekend might be in order down the road.
There we go.
You know?
Now you have my attention.
I think we can make a trip over to the UK, to Ireland, maybe get the OTT to host there at the Game Center, and I bet we can get quite a few
you
people.
Tell me when, and I'll rock up with a couple of Soviet divisions, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Divisions.
All I want to know is, because of electronic warfare, are F4 Wild Weasels in gameplay?
Funnily enough, he was talking about F4s the other day. Warwick's right in the American list, and he was wondering about what to do, because bizarrely, there's not actually that many vehicles in an American list. There's not many different types.
No.
You know, it's actually, when we were looking at going, oh my God, in 83, there's hardly anything. It's like
in 83
yeah.
M60s, M113s, and variants.
Exactly, and that's it. It's like, oh my God, this is really boring.
It is, because that was the transition period for the modern U.S. Army. So, you know, we decided Vietnam stuff needed to go away, and we needed to modernize, and That's
But
when the push.
A10s.
Yeah, we didn't realise there was so little. So, I mean, we've been looking at things like mutt jeeps with recoilless rifles and tow launchers and things like that. And but yeah, aircraft is something for the Americans that may sort of expand beyond what we've done already in the list, because there's so many. They may not have many ground vehicles, but my God, the amount of specialist aircraft is
A10.
Yeah, well, yeah. They're there. It's just, you just remove a whole section of the table when that arrives.
I was going to say, just say bye to your Soviet armor column, because it's
exactly. Yeah, they're extreme, but no, I mean it would be nice if we can bring things like that in, and I think the American list is where we'd look at stuff like that, more specialist aircraft. So
fantastic.
Yeah, I'll mention it to him.
All right.
Well,
we'll have to keep in touch, and let us know when we can get our grubby little hands on the book. And
sure, yeah.
We'll definitely do reviews and some playthroughs. And I'm serious about a war game weekend.
Well, I mean, it'd be great if we've got the Vietnam system at a point where we could show you that as well.
Yeah, most definitely.
Because we're taking a very different approach with that.
Awesome.
Just a quick one on that, Piers. Sorry. What scale are you aiming for that?
That's going to be 20. Well, to be honest, look, I mean, our stuff you can play it in anything.
Yeah, it's just because with Empress and Greco 40.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's very much, the idea behind it is very much it's single base figure. So it's 20 mil, 28 mil, but it'll work in 15. The concept behind it is that you play it, whereas one of the players will take the Viet Cong or NVA, and everybody else plays the Americans, regardless of how many players you've got. What's key to it is the whole game, whatever game you play isn't one game. Every game is part of your platoon's tour of duty.
Excellent.
So the way we want people to play it is that you play a year, you play a tour of duty. So each game changes your platoon and how it functions. And the Viet Cong does the same. He will bring different things. So you never know what you're going to face, apart from you kind of, when you're doing the scenarios, there's this thing where you look if it's a low intensity area or if it's a high intensity area, and then the VC player can pick and choose different things depending on what sort of risks you're taking. And the American player is rewarded. If they want to go into a high intensity area, they get more sort of bonuses for doing that, but obviously more risk. And it's all about
that scratches my itch of narrative play, which I love.
We kind of want. I mean, the whole focus of Vietnam for us was getting the boys home safely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's what we wanted the game to be about. It wasn't particularly about the fighting. It was more about that you've got your platoon of men and you want to get as many of them home in one piece after a year's tour of duty.
Especially if you name them.
Yeah. Well, that's it. I mean, that's kind of what we've always done in Vietnam games over the last 30 years is, you have your dudes, and you grow attached to them. That's I mean, the games we've always liked, things like Longstreet and Maurice and things that have let us play campaigns without any hassle of it being a campaign, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Make it a very easy narrative. And we've done it with Battlegroup in the past when we have campaigns. So it's being designed from the ground up to do that. So that it's sort of, rather than being, you can play campaigns with this will be, the default is you are playing a campaign with this. So yeah, that would be whether we can make it work.
Really, really good. That does scratch my narrative itch, because that's one of the things I like about. There's a couple of the I like the modern systems more. So to name a couple, I'm a big Spectre fan and I'm a big Sanguine fan, and Sanguine especially has that because you have that role play element of creating a platoon, and it's all done off dice roll. And Spectre, when we play Spectre, especially, there's no points. They brought them in for people who want points, but there's no points. You build a unit, so you say have a 6-man SEAL team, and it's then the narrative around that mission, the narrative around the story, and if it's a collection of missions, it's the whole what's going on thing. So that really does what you're talking about, scratches that narrative, which I love.
I think it's because of the type of the war and the nature of that war. I think it's the only way you can do it justice and get that that feel of it, because we don't. One thing we've always had a problem with Vietnam games is reflecting the body count in the way it should be reflected for the two combatants.
Mm-hmm.
So for the Americans, it's very much is keeping people alive. So that's something we wanted right from the outset. Was could be to us. Yeah, I mean, I suppose that we both like our history as well as we like playing games, and so it's always trying to squish those two things together in a way that is still a playable game, but has the right feel. So I suspect our Vietnam rules will probably be very, very narrative.
Yeah, this is the way we've been doing our Valor and Victory Vietnam expansions. Is if you're either American Army, Australians, or American Marine Corps, if that force loses like a full squad, and not only are they, casualties, but then the NVA or Viet Cong take possession of those casualties, that's pretty much game. I mean, unless you completely table the NVA. It's, number one, you have to pretty much eliminate the NVA. Never mind objective points. It's a war without objectives. This was in our Ops Center episode a little while ago. And then it was also, you have to keep your casualties down. And then those casualties that you do take, killed, wounded, or anything else in between, you have to get them off the table. Everyone comes home, no matter what state they're in. And that's crucial for a whole host of reasons. Morale, military intelligence, media relations, the civilian population back home. You've got to get those people home no matter what.
And I think that's what you have to put into Vietnam, because otherwise it's not Vietnam,
Absolutely.
And with it, I mean, the army list that we've been playing around with, because the American player says, right, I'm either going low, medium, or high intensity. And then the VC player has a list that corresponds to each of those. And one thing we wanted for the low intensity was that then the VC player has an option of not choosing anything offensive. So he can literally go, right, I'm going to take 4 guys working in the field that might have AKs. I'm going to take that bloke walking a water buffalo, and I'm going to take a load of punji pits. I'm going to take those 2 children out, who one of them is carrying a stick that might look like a rifle. And, do you know what I mean? So there'll be that opportunity so the American player will play a game and go, look, it's all civilians. Or is it all civilians? And then it stems from there. And the interesting you're saying there about the press and public relations, that's why we wanted to do the campaign, to bring all those bits into it.
Sort of the things we were talking about, again, super briefly in the Ops Center episode that went up the other day, is, like you're saying, denial of battle. Does a VC player have to take anything offensive at all? There's victory conditions in those games where, I mean, we're not suggesting that your game plays this way, because it would be a pretty dull game. But when you're designing your scenarios, try and design no matter what game system you're playing, guys. No matter what game system you're playing, when you're trying to design a Vietnam game, especially not so much for the NVA, but definitely for the Viet Cong, have the math worked out where theoretically the Viet Cong can win if a shot is never fired.
Yeah,
because the Americans go out, they beat the bush on these ops, they never find the enemy. That's considered an NVA victory. And then number 2, if you do put press on the board, like a media team, a camera team, a news reporter team, let the Viet Cong control that piece. Viet Cong player. That way, he's always in exactly the wrong place at the wrong time.
Exactly.
just little hacks. Again, we make those episodes very system agnostic, because who knows what people are playing. But if you're making, whether you're playing it in who knows what, just here's some little tips for how to make your game feel like Vietnam, because it's not World War II the sequel. This is my big trepidation with bolt action Vietnam. It is not World War II the sequel. You can get away with that with Korea. You cannot do that in Vietnam.
Yeah. I to be honest, I'm not convinced you can even do it with Korea. But that's just. I mean, I suppose we come from it from the opposite spectrum of what Warlord do, and Warlord, what they do very well.
Yeah.
But they are focused on a game that plays at a points level in a shop, so you can rock up with your points and play somebody else that you've never met and have a game, which is grand. We're the opposite. You wouldn't do that with a game of Battlegroup, I don't think.
No.
I suppose you might. Some people, we've done it before, but there's always a little bit more preamble for a game of Battlegroup. It's not a tournament game, and the narrative to us is of prime importance. You know, there has to be for us. There's always a reason, whether it's the generic scenario gives you the reason, or you see the story develop through what the troops do on the table or whatever. But has to always be that narrative, and because every war has a different feel and a different narrative, we've always taken the view that you pretty much need to start afresh with every period that we do. It's, well, may as well just start again, you know. I mean, and Warwick's even done it with his Soldiers of God, his Crusade rules. He's written Romans. It's called Soldiers of Rome, so it's the same sort of series, but the rules inside mechanically are very different to reflect Rome versus barbarians, as instead of Crusaders versus Arabs and Saracens, you know. And I'm writing an Agincourt version, and I thought, I'll just be able to take, you know, I'll just take the Crusaders and use that, but it doesn't work, you know. It's like, oh, well, these are very different. So I think you just porting stuff across occasionally, yeah, some of the mechanics will work and some of the things, but I think you'll always get a better narrative game, and a better game that feels right for the period if you start afresh every time. It takes longer. Yeah. And it's a lot more work, and that's
or at the very least use it as a baseline, but don't let it get past the baseline. You know?
Yeah. But you know, I mean, Warlord work in a different way to us. You know, they have to have things published, and they have to have things out at certain times. We're lucky; we don't. You know, if Northag takes probably nearly 4 years now to do, that's just what it takes. You know, we don't care. And people say to me, well, why don't you write the game to be, you know, a tournament set of rules? Lots more people buy it. And I'm like, yeah, but there's no point, because I don't want to play it.
Yeah.
I think that's the key difference to Warwick and myself. And
we're of one mind on that one.
Yeah, you know, people say, well, why wouldn't you be better off writing a game that will sell loads of, you know, copies? And like, but I don't want to play a game. I want to play a game if the game sells loads and I like it, brilliant. At the end of the day, I'm playing this game. You know, I mean, that's why Battlegroup is like it is, and why the books look so nice is because those books are for us. At the end of the day, we don't care if anybody buys them or not. We've got them. They're all right. You know, it's just been so nice that other people seem to have the same outlook, you know, and I think that's where a lot of people go wrong, is you've got to write. For me, I think I can only write a game or a scenario if I want to play it. If I don't want to play it, why would I write it? You know, so when people say, oh, you know, Battlegroup or Northag should be much more competition based and it should be like that, and I say, well, we can't write that, because we can only write what we want to play. For us, it's the history and the narrative that needs to come out and be up front. And that's why if we, as I say, when we do Vietnam, it will be a completely different set of rules. I'd love to do Korea, because I've really got into Korea lately. So I don't know where I'm going to go with Korea. A kind of part of me wants to use Battlegroup, parts of Battlegroup front, parts of me wants to use Northag, and then I kind of look at it and think, actually, you know, neither work for that. This is a really weird war. You know, but yeah, we'll see what happens.
Awesome.
And you know, the whole First World War thing, somebody must do a decent set of First World War rules soon, because there isn't. So yeah.
All right, guys. Well, we're hitting on the 2-hour mark, and that was a great conversation. I wish we had more time to talk. We could talk all day, but I know people got lives. So
speak for yourself.
So I want to thank Piers for joining us today. You are welcome back anytime. Keep us in the loop as you progress through things, and let's definitely get some gameplay in. Jim,
sure.
Enjoy the weekend with your family.
Oh, yeah.
And Ralph?
Yeah.
Just keep on doing what you do.
Which isn't much at the moment.
You know, let us know how that Ghost Recon's going. So
I will, yeah.
You know, how's that going? I am trying to get the Arma 3 server back up. I'm going to try and live stream tomorrow and finish up the Historicon miniature. Thanks to everybody who joined us last night for the live stream on that. It's a nice miniature. And, we've got more stuff coming down the pike. So until we see you guys all again, this is G for the SITREP Podcast. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you soon. Take care, everybody.
Are you looking to become a Tier 1 operator in the gaming world? Elevate your games with Black Site Studio Terrain.